Just for context, I am male in this story. I have a hard time telling this story. I believed I'm a changed man, and I've done a lot of good and helped a lot of people, but during my youth, I was a real piece of crap. I was around 24 years old, and I found myself around with the wrong crowd, partying, doing drugs, and I ended up becoming addicted to meth. At the start of the addiction, it was manageable. I could still work and go about my day, but as I grew more and more addicted, the high needed to be high all day, and I ended up losing most of my friends and my job, and ended up roaming the streets and stealing to support my habit. The way it worked, while high, I kept myself rotting away in some drug house. But when the withdrawals came, well, I'm ashamed to admit it, but I became a totally deranged lunatic, willing to do anything to get my hands on some cash. One night I was totally dry and I begged every dealer to advance me some stuff, but to no avail. I'm getting more desperate and feeling the pulse of the withdrawals messing with my head. I decided to roam the streets in hopes to find anything to trade. Now, this wasn't my first rodeo. In most neighbourhoods, the police would be called if I even showed up there, so I wandered into a middle-class neighbourhood, way further than my usual spots. I tried to open the door on a few cars, but after setting an alarm off, I jumped like a chicken and hide in a corner, cowering in said corner. I see a house down a cul-de-sac, but the front door is slightly cracked open. The warm light inside attracts me like some type of moth to a flame, and as I approach, I notice the deadbolt is thrown, but it looks like the mat is stuck, so they probably thought it was shut and looked around, and it seems no one's around, so without much thinking, I decided to stealthily go inside. I admit I had no idea what I was doing at this point. I go inside and I am amazed. It's been such a long time since I went into such a nice house. It's warm, it smells really good. I'm almost hypnotized, so I sit on the sofa for a minute and just look around. Memories of a better time start flooding into my head, but I quickly come to my senses when I see a purse on the counter. I bounce off the couch and go running towards it, rummage around it, and jackpot. The wallet is thick, and I pull off at around $100 from it. Completely ecstatic, I look around and turn to leave. As I get to the entrance, I stop because a little girl is standing in the doorway looking like she was about to close the door. But we stare at each other, eyes wide open. My head is rushing from the roller coaster of emotions, and I went from ecstasy to being about to soil myself. It's over, I thought. But out of pure sheer panic, like I was possessed by some animal, I pounced on her, and I covered her mouth with my hand, just as the beginning of a scream was coming out of her. I'm in total distress, frantically looking around. The little girl was struggling, and I didn't want to hurt her in any way, but I desperately wanted her not to scream. I kept whispering for her to just be quiet, and I let her go, but I could feel her muffled screams under my hand. I suddenly felt a sharp pain on the side of my hand as she bit down on me. In frustration, I hold back a scream and lift my other hand, and I slapped her across the face. In that moment, she let out a sort of yelp and in response, but she stopped trying to scream at that time. After hearing some sounds upstairs, I quickly came back to my senses and made a beeline for the front door. And I can hear her screaming again for her daddy and other voices yelling in the distance. Every thought is racing into my head at once, and I honestly didn't mean to hurt her or act that way, and I made it back home later to that disgusting drug den. I didn't see anything specifically on the news, but there's no doubt that they were probably called the cops. I got away with it, and I must admit, the night of the incident, I got high again with the money I stole. I can only imagine the trauma that I brought to that poor kid. I've been sober for 12 years now, and I do my best to offset the karmic balance, but may God forgive me.